So one of the concepts I've talked about in the last years, one I called men's relationship emotional labor. And I brought that up and created it because I began to notice that men are generally considered, as far as relationships go, to basically do nothing. That's the ongoing stereotype that men do nothing, women do all the emotional work, and if anything, men exploit women on their emotional work. And what I began to discover, having had marriage and several significant relationships, even in my own life, that men do a lot of untold emotional labor that nobody credits them for, but they are measured by how well they do it and can be fired in a relationship if they don't do it at all. As a matter of fact, I've argued that it is probably the most important thing that women judge men against, even though they never tell us that. So the first one, for example, would be something comedian Patrice O'Neal referred to as downloading, right? You ever notice, fellas, how often your girl wants to talk, but she doesn't really want to talk? It's not a back and forth. As a matter of fact, if you don't say anything, some women will go ahead and talk for hours. And it seems like a preoccupation on a regular basis that they have to just talk for hours. And they even stop caring if you're listening. They want you near, but they're not actually asking for feedback. They just have this need to download into you. Well, guess what? That's a form of men's relationship emotional labor. You ever not talk to her for a period of time and watch how she behaves when you start to again, and how much she seems to need to be able to do it? Many men report this to me on a regular basis, and I've sat in with BGS and listened to a number of different shows on YouTube and listened to men talk about this incessant need to be talked at, where you may not even be in the room as far as they're concerned. I mean, even when I was younger, I used to know brothers that would put the phone down and walk out the room, and she'd still be talking when they came back to it later because he was almost irrelevant. His presence was needed. But other than that, now if he was an active and good listener, by further participating, it made her feel even better. But at the end of the day, many men report having to even force themselves into the conversation just so it can have some back and forth. That is a form of emotional labor that is thrust upon you, socially expected of you, and is part of your measurement as a good man, whether or not you're capable of listening, right, and playing that role in a relationship. And I want to hear men in the comment section talk to me about your experiences with this dynamic. Have you experienced women downloading into you? Has it been treated as an expectation in relationships, whether you've said you would or not? And how far have you seen it pushed? How far have you experienced it being pushed? But little things like if you can bring up fine points later on, if you can find new ways to support her based on things she said. We're urged by psychologists and relationship counselors to do this kind of thing on a regular basis. How often do we hear women urged to actually listen to the men they say they're with? See, one of the things we're told is men don't talk enough, but nobody ever questions whether women listen enough. The narrative, especially in terms of relationship counselors and therapists, has always been framed as men need to be supportive and listen. Women are not told to do that. And I think partly what it's done is create an entitlement in this regard where women feel comfortable extending longer and longer periods of time where they talk. And the social expectation is that you listen and won't even ask you questions. I've kind of informally measured this when I've met new women, off a dating app or something, and we have our conversations. 70% of the time they talk. Very rarely have I found women actually asking you questions. A lot of the time it's them talking and then you interjecting to say something about your own experience, and then they go right back to talking. See, this is a form of emotional labor that men perform, listening. And it is societally kind of imposed. It is kind of pressured. We're told that that's a standard.